You are listening to the Exceptional Conservative Network. For more information, go to www.theexceptionalconservativeshow.com.
Good afternoon, America, and the rest of the world. Welcome to the new. I'm your host, Randy Perm. Man, I can't believe it's Monday already. Yes, it is. I hope everyone had a great weekend. Um, I kind of intentionally stayed away from commenting or discussing, except for with the exception on Friday, because it was kind of breaking news about President Trump's COVID-19 catching, and as well as the rest of the staff or a majority of the staff and other GOP leaders that caught coronavirus. I stayed away from it for two reasons. Number one is because some of the milk isn't clean. I'm not saying that they don't have it. I'm not saying they do have it. It just something just is not adding up to me. And I think it's more gearing around the timing of everything. And I already talked about this on Friday a little bit, but I just wanted to touch on it again because there are people asking me, "What are your thoughts about this?" I'm like, I'm just gonna leave that one alone. I'm not even gonna entertain it right now. And the second reason is because we already seen where there's been false positives given with the coronavirus, and I'm gonna talk about this more in detail later on in the show about cases being falsely counted, falsely reported, and what have you. I'm gonna talk about that later on. But first up, I hope everyone, like I said, hope you all had a great weekend. A lot was going on this weekend. Did a lot of I'm gonna say cleaning, but cleaning up things. I was being a firefighter all weekend. I had to replace the toilet tank in one of our bathrooms because of the missus. Yeah, she. So yeah, it was just madness this weekend. But I am here with you all today, so let's get right into it, shall we? But first, let's we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna roll right into it. So over the weekend, um, or late last week rather, the Pope said gave some commentary on about COVID-19 and the how capitalism does not work for COVID with COVID, and more so, more pointedly, he he has this new encyclical that's coming out, and it's called Fratelli Tutti, meaning brothers all in Italian. And he discusses a need for new politics and promotes a dialogue, solidarity, and rejects war at all costs. And it's kind of strange from coming from from the Catholicism side of the house that the Pope, the Papa, the religious leader of the world, or one of the religious leaders of the world, is suddenly having a shift in vocalizing his disdainment for the the rich, capitalism, and wars. Given the history of Catholicism, Christianity, we say going all the way back to the Crusades, the spreading of Christianity through war and everything else, and all of that good stuff. It's strange because he's even denouncing or rejecting the Catholic Church's general justification for war, and it also goes against what Saint Augustine, not the place, the person, Saint Augustine described in just ad bellum, just in bello, and just ad bellum. And what those mean in Latin is for in just and bello authority. These are the reasons to go to war, to or behave in war. Excuse me. To behave in war, just and bello is because of authority, uh, cause, intention, and for as a last resort. Now, in just ad bellum, there's for cases of going to war would be or to behave in war. Excuse me, getting backwards. Proportionality, discrimination, and responsibility. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole dissertation or a college classroom piece about the differences of the two, but just understand you can just look up Justin Bello and just add Bello and understand how that relates to global application of war, religion, politics, and everything else. And I had a discussion a few weeks back with one of my dear friends, who's also I also consider one of my pastors, about how politics and religion do in fact go hand in hand, and he kind of begged to differ and said, no, they don't. God has made them distinctly two different things. Yes, they're two separate entities. However, they still do go hand in hand. And just the understanding of what's going on with the Pope coming onto the world stage and asserting a political belief. This is not a religious belief. This is a political belief about how we should embrace peace through socialism. These are not my words. These are coming straight from Pope Francis. And so uh, he talks of, he criticized how the pandemic has affected capitalism in terms of job loss, criticized trickle down economics, and he supports the neoliberalism. Um, I guess you could say their structure, their pillars. And so I I, I, I took pause in reading this article and everything, and I kind of thought I was like, man, this is something really interesting to talk about on Monday because a lot of people don't understand how is it that the Pope is an influential that was a tongue twister person in terms of both religion and politics. And here it is, you have a supreme leader of a faith who is saying that we should get away from, embracing being rich, embracing this type of lifestyle and what have you, and start looking at socialism, uh, not being wealthy, serving the poor, and what have you. Now, it it's very contradictory to what has been traditionalized, not only in the religious faith, but in the political spectrum, and also in the cultural spectrum of the world. Many people aspire to be rich. Many people aspire to not be in poverty. So for one political slash religious leader to come on board and say, you know what, we should embrace this. This is a cool thing. It's kind of weird, if you ask me. It's just mind boggling. But a lot of people don't also don't know that Pope Francis he um he named himself after the mendicant friar who was renowned who renounced being wealthy, who was He had a dissolute feeling towards the lifestyle, and he embraced poverty. So, just like I said, folks, you kind of have to, you really, really, absolutely have to pay attention to what's going on in the world outside of the United States, outside of your bubble or where you're residing. You have to look at things that's going on out on the outskirts of things, because for the Pope to embrace and speak and write on this is quite alarming, because what he's doing is he's creating a catalyst for an extreme shift in ideology that's going on around the world. Now, does he have any merit to say, or is there any merit to what he's saying in terms of having, well, for the COVID to have been a hindrance to the economic platform? No. In fact, I would say that COVID COVID-19. This is just my take here, folks. I would say COVID-19 actually proved that capitalism works. And hear me out. I'm not going to spend too much time on this piece, but when if you have, so we could look at Venezuela, South America, the South American countries as an example for this during the pandemic, or the height of the pandemic. If we look at them, we take their example, or take what went on there compared to the rest of the world who actually operate in free markets and free and capitalism and everything else, you will see that the ability to churn production, take a loss, take a short term cut in profits and everything else, actually fared out better than countries that actually practice socialism that was facing issues with the pandemic. And you see it, you saw it during the crisis, during like I said, during the height of the crisis. You had companies that were able to shut down, or businesses, small businesses even, they were able to shut down for a period of time because they saved money, because they didn't sell their products at the cost. And this is going into Marxism. Selling your product, you should sell your product at the cost of what it took for you to make it, versus trying to make a profit off of your labor, off of materials and everything else. You should sell it for exactly for what it costed you to make it. That's a Marxist theorist principle, versus make a profit, sell it for as much as you can through justification of labor, materials, time, energy, so on and so forth. Capitalize off of that, take those profits, tuck it away, create new inventions, create new products, or whatever the case may be, you do with those profits. But it shows that in order to sustain something, you have to add a little bit more to the cost. So if we look at these socialist ran countries, nations, cities, towns, people, even, you will see that they struggled significantly during the crisis, and that they were not able to have that extra little bit that they otherwise could have had they performed their functions under a capitalist understanding. So let's say this is a black man, a constitutionalist, a conservative, and a Christian, that the Pope is emphatically wrong on this. And I would love the opportunity to have a one-on-one discussion with him about this. So maybe that will happen one day. We don't know. But folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short, quick commercial break.
You are listening to the Exceptional Conservative Network. For more information, go to www.theexceptionalconservativeshow.com.
Alexa, help me find the best in urban conservative news, talk, and movies. Okay, Alexa, we found it.
If you're looking to have some blacksmithing work done, check out Old Emerald Coast Forge, veteran owned and operated, located out of Louisiana. You can check out their Facebook page at Old Emerald Coast Forge, or you can follow them on Instagram at Old Emerald Coast Forge. Once again, blacksmithing work done, no task too tough for these guys. Veteran owned and operated, from custom knives, swords, kitchen knives, furniture railings, furniture out of steel, jewelry, you name it. No task too tough for these guys at Old Emerald Coast Forge. Facebook, Old Emerald Coast Forge. On Instagram at Old Emerald Coast Forge. Veteran owned and operated.
You are listening to the Exceptional Conservative Network. For more information, go to www.theexceptionalconservativeshow.com.
Hey, welcome back. So, as you can see, we're spending time across the pond today, and not too much on U.S. news or anything, because we're in the U.S. You already know what's going on. Well, you should know what's going on in your neck of the woods. So we're trying to expand your horizons a little bit by discussing things that are happening overseas. And one of the headlines is the UK admit that they erroneously added 16,000 cases to their overall numbers. And but this should not be a surprise, and you know, because we're doing it in the U.S. too. We're doing it in other places. There was a erroneous addition of numbers in Italy when I was living there just a few months ago. There were erroneous numbers being added to Germany, France. It got to the point where so many countries were just chucking up a death to COVID that became suspicious. It was like one night, literally one night, I went to bed and I was watching a little CNN ticker there of the COVID cases, and the number was like at the time I want to say it was like somewhere sitting around 50,000 cases. This was early on. I woke up the next morning. It was jumped up to like 130,000. I was like, that's weird, but okay, And then the death numbers were just skyrocketing. Just like every day, it seemed like thousands of people dying a day, and then it tapered off. And so I I talk about this a lot because I need people to wake up. And I'm not diminishing. Don't take this as diminishing from actual the virus itself. This is I'm not saying it's a hoax. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is we have to be cognizant. We have to be honest with ourselves to actually recognize that people that were dying from COVID were not exclusively dying from COVID. There were comorbidity or morbidities. There were other factors involved. There was people that was in a motorcycle accident that just so happened to have COVID at the same time, and they were rolled up into the COVID numbers. Check out Florida. I, Folks, I can't make this stuff up. If I could, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I would be working for Disney or something because these stories that we get are astronomically crazy. How is it possible? I mean, seriously, how is it possible that you say, "Oh, we added 16,000 by mistake because we thought we thought there was cases, but there were not cases, or we missed the numbers and the numbers update daily, or it may take a month for the actual numbers to come out." And the aggregation tools. If you're telling me that it takes almost a month to reflect accurately what the COVID count is, whether it's death or cases, then why are you having a daily rolling number of these numbers, these cases and deaths? If it takes a month to actually get an accurate picture, then pick a day and update us monthly then to give us an accurate picture, if that's the case. But I'm gonna let this doctor here. She does a succinct job in explaining how all of this works. And I think I think I'm gonna do service to a lot of people by showing this video because it got a lot of views on YouTube, but not enough, in my opinion, that for people to collectively understand what's going on here. So I'm gonna shut up and you check this out.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Your Health with Dr. Christy. My name is Dr. Christy Reisinger, and today let's use this episode to talk a little bit about the recent accusation that the CDC quietly altered their numbers regarding deaths caused by COVID-19, and that actually only 6% of the deaths were caused by COVID, and the other 94% were caused by something else. First, let's talk about death certificates and how they're filled out. Surprisingly, death certificates can be difficult to complete, and one study I read showed that up to 30% of death certificates are not completed accurately. Here's an example of a sample death certificate. As you can see, there's a Part 1 and Part 2 on the certificate. Unless someone has been murdered, been involved in a deadly accident, or committed suicide, underlying causes are expected to be given. It's rare for any that I filled out to not have health conditions such as diabetes and high blood pressure that contribute to the death. These are usually placed in Part 2 of the death certificate. But Part 1 is more complicated. It is expected to have a chain of events starting with the underlying condition. For example, atherosclerotic coronary artery disease caused the coronary artery thrombosis that then caused the myocardial infarction or heart attack that then caused the fatal rupture of the myocardium. You can imagine how complicated these can be. So an example with COVID-19 is that COVID-19 caused pneumonia, which then caused advanced respiratory distress syndrome, which was the final cause of death. At the end of the day, the data is only as good as the death certificate. So let's go back to the theory that the CDC has quietly changed its data based on a tweet that said, quote, This week, the CDC quietly updated the COVID number to admit that only 6% of all of the 153,504 deaths recorded actually died from COVID. That's 9,210 deaths. The other 94% had 2 to 3 other serious illnesses, and the overwhelming majority were of very advanced age. Some claim that this is an indication that the pandemic is not as severe as public health officials have said it is. To that statement, I would simply say the 6% that reflected COVID as the only cause of death on their death certificate were either filled out incorrectly or were in patients very young or very healthy without any other underlying conditions, because it's really rare to not have underlying conditions such as diabetes, high blood pressure, or obesity, especially as we age. When you look further at the data, those 94% that listed other underlying conditions on the death certificate, almost all of
I'm sorry. I had to pause her right there for a second, and I want to emphasize something that she said. It is rare that if you have COVID, that you had no other underlying conditions, and that 6% that the CDC itself said that only 6% of the COVID deaths were because of just they only had COVID. They had nothing else, and that she said that it was likely that the death certificate was filled out improperly or incorrect. Well, folks, although that may be true, but if the CDC, this is conflicting information here, but she does a great job explaining everything. But there is conflicting information being given from both sides. If you're telling me that we're collecting the data based on death certificates, and if the death certificate only lists COVID and no other conditions associated with that death or with COVID, then we can safely assume that the person had only died from COVID. Now, there may have been a catalyst of other things that COVID triggered to accelerate their death. That's one thing. We can say, okay, they may have died from cancer, but because they had COVID, it accelerated their cancer stage and up to ultimately killed them. So therefore, we're going to credit it to COVID. That gets tricky, folks, because we don't know that for sure. We can only speculate that. And so I'm leaning towards believing that, or hypothesizing that, most people that died that had COVID, it may have accelerated their death because they had an underlying condition. But had they not had the underlying condition, they likely still would have died, probably in the same time frame or maybe a short time later, from what it is that they actually had. And COVID was just a complicating factor into it, but not necessarily the reason why they died. Like I said, going back to the person being killed on a motorcycle, but he had COVID, and they said, "Oh, well, he had COVID, so therefore he died of COVID in a motorcycle accident." Anyways, go back to the video.
them listed COVID-19 as the underlying cause of death. But if you're still skeptical, then I want to shift to another way to determine deaths from COVID-19, and this is by using the excess death rates. Using statistical models based on mortality data from the past 3 years, projections are made for the upcoming year. And the number of excess deaths is the difference between the model's projections and the actual observations. Starting in mid-March 2020, there was a spike in deaths that has continued to be present. The cause for this spike can only be attributed to COVID-19, since there are no other reasonable causes for this spike. As we move into the flu season, this may be more difficult to tease out because we have seen other times with excess deaths. The last period occurred in December 2018 through January 2019, when there was an unusually deadly flu strain. So for those who are concerned that we are undercounting or overcounting the COVID-19 deaths, I think at the end of the day, a good way to look at how well we are doing is to compare the numbers we're obtaining with death certificates to the excess deaths compared to this time last year. The excess deaths so far are calculated to be about 200,000 at the end of July, whereas the actual deaths attributable to COVID were reported to be 150,000. We know that the data can take up to 1 month to report, so that may be one reason for the difference in the numbers. We'll have to wait to see if these numbers become more similar as the data comes in. But for skeptics, the numbers being reported may actually be lower than the actual number of deaths from COVID. So at the end of the day, no, I do not think the CDC is trying to mislead the public with their data. You just have to understand what the data is saying and the limitations that the data have. Thanks for joining me.
I call bull. But no, seriously, how can you take the excess data from 3 years, from the previous 3 years, as a projection model for in comparison to actual observable data when there is no excess data to extrapolate from in the previous 3 years when this has only been occurring for 1 year, not even a year, started in January. If you want to get technical, okay, October, whatever. But still, we're just now approaching the 1 year marker. So to take data, here's better. You're utilizing congruent data to make a projection on something that you really can't project all based on because this has never happened before. Now, the only thing that you can almost do is take information from the 1918 not bird flu, Spanish flu from 1918. You could take that trajectory data and kind of do a comparison, maybe, but even then you can't because it's two different viruses. So even then, it's not gonna work. And we already see that the mortality rate, the actual mortality rate behind COVID, is much lower than what was expected to be. Remember in the beginning when everything started getting projectedly to be shut down, they were like, "Oh, it's gonna be millions of deaths across the world." We just crossed a million, and we've been doing this. We've been dealing with this for almost a year. So even in the United States alone, it's been 200,000 deaths, just a little bit over 205 now. And once again, going back to CDC's data, 6%, not my data, CDC's, 6% are actual COVID. Can we count comorbidities? Let's not for a second here. Let's remove comorbidities. Let's remove whatever underlying conditions a person may have. Let's look at the actual fatality of COVID-19 in itself. It has so far fared to be less than the actual seasonal flu. So I mean, I get it, folks, that it affects older generations, older people a lot worse than anything. The younger crowds, I got that. So does heart disease. So does cancer. So does a lot of things. Okay, the older you are, the more susceptible you are to die from something. The common cold, that's just simple math. So I get it, but I once again, doctor did a great job explaining some things that I didn't even know about, the filling out of the death certificates and how there's a build up to determining the cause of death based on previous conditions and everything, what have you. I got all that, but I think it's safe to say, and if we want to be honest with ourselves and lose the disingenuity of saying that somebody died from COVID, when we say that, we're saying that as an exclusive factor and not an inclusive factor. And there's a difference. When you're saying that they died from COVID, what you're alluding to is they had nothing else wrong with them, and that they died solely because of this virus. When 9 times out of 10, that is not the case. They had something else, and COVID contributed to their death. So we have to be careful with this. That's all I'm gonna say on that, folks. Folks, we're gonna jump to our extended break. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
You are listening to the Exceptional Conservative Network. For more information, go to www.theexceptionalconservativeshow.com. You are listening to the Exceptional Conservative Network. For more information, go to www.theexceptionalconservativeshow.com.
If you're looking to have blacksmith work done, check out Old Emerald Coast Forge, located out of Louisiana. Veteran owned and operated, Old Emerald Coast Forge provides excellent work in terms of steel customizing with furniture, swords, kitchen knives, personal knives, you name it. Old Emerald Coast Forge. You can follow them on Facebook at Old Emerald Coast Forge or on Instagram at Old Emerald Coast Forge. Veteran owned and operated, located out of Louisiana. No task too tough for these guys. Check them out. Hey, welcome back from our extended break. So, there was one thing I didn't know, and in my studiousness, studiousness, my studiousness, I did a little bit of research on this topic because I didn't know, and it's okay when Randy does not know something, because Randy will do everything in his power to become knowledgeable of that in which he does not know. That was a little bit of Socrates for you. But anyways, this country, it is called New Caledonia, and they are actually a territory of France. And just recently, this past week, they voted to remain a territory under the French regime. And I thought to myself, okay, no big deal. You know, they like the rulership of France over them. They want to stay connected, you know, in governance of them and everything else. So, okay, you know, whatever. And I thought to myself, where is New Caledonia? Ooh, I never heard of this place. So, in my research, I found that they're located actually in the archipelago region, which is down by Australia. Not to say that they're on the coast of Australia; they're a little bit ways out, but they're down by Australia. Now, if you look at the European map, as or um, the southern hemisphere, if you will, map, and you see where France is located at versus where this particular place, New Caledonia, is located at, you would think, how is it possible that France was able to colonize this location and Australia did not take it over at this point, right? You would think that, but no, they did not. So New Caledonia has been under they've been self governing. They have their own Congress, their own local administrations, and everything else for the last 30 years, right? And they have been going back and forth to determine over the years on whether or not they should break away from France's control and become an independent nation. And so they voted this time around to not do so again. They did it back in 2018, and it should come back up in 2022 on the referendum for their voting referendum. Now, New Caledonia became a French colony back in 1853 under Napoleon III, the nephew to Napoleon Bonaparte. And it was for decades, it was a prison colony. And and it became an overseas territory after World War II, and France reacquired it and granted French citizenship to the people that reside, the inhabitants of New Caledonia. They're called Canics. And they were granted citizenship back in 1957. So like I said once again, not something I knew, and I'm sure there's a lot of little islands and stuff like that. They're like that. I'm more than positive, and they're actually relatively close to Fiji. So um, it's a collection of about 12 islands, and I thought it was quite interesting to understand, to see, not understand because I already know, but to see how certain countries have territorial access or control of other little places that is geographically nowhere near them. So they actually have to go through other territories, other sovereign nations to control and get to these places. That's almost kind of like how the United States is with Guam, with the Northwest Territories and stuff like that. We have to go through certain things to I guess you could say govern uh, in which of what we control. So I thought it was just interesting and wanted to share that with you all today. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you already knew this, and Randy, you're a dumbass. Who knows? But either way, I accept it. Okay. So, but that is pretty much all I have for today. Yeah, that is all I have for today. It was great talking to you all once again, as usual, and as always. I appreciate you so much. If you happen to get bored, you can download my book, The New You, Now Equipped with Wisdom, on Amazon, e-format, and you can support my show through Cash App, $ R Perham, Purham, RPURHAM, for US, or on PayPal, R Perham for US. And you can support the show. You can email me at rperham@gmail.com if you want to be a guest on the show. If you want to advertise, promote something on the show, I'll be more than happy to do that for a nominal fee or a donation. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Parlor. I'm hanging out on Parlor more so these days because of the censorship that Facebook is doing. Several of my friends have been put in Facebook jail or banned, blocked, and what have you on Facebook recently for their conservative views. Luckily for me, I have not came across that problem per se. Um, I got into a Facebook a couple of years ago with one of their admin personnel, and I said, if you ever, you ever, and I say, and I mean ever, put me in Facebook jail again for something I posted, something that I shared. Not only will I catch a flight, but I'm gonna catch a case. And ever since then, I have not had a problem. So take it for what you want. But no, seriously, LinkedIn, I'm on pretty much on all the platforms, so you can connect with me. We can hang out, talk, chat, and everything else. If you got questions, if there's something you want me to discuss, I'll do the research and discuss it on the show, or we can discuss it together, however you want to do that. But no, like I said, seriously, appreciate you all, and stay tuned. Actually, in the next hour, we have David McQuill and the Global Impact Show coming up at 3 p.m. So Eastern Time. So stay tuned for that, and we will see you all on Friday, God willing. God bless, and we will, yeah, take it easy. Talk to you later.